How's it going, everybody? My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, we're going to do a top-to-bottom rules comparison between the CFL and the XFL amid all this speculation of the collaboration between the two leagues. But really quickly, before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting that like button and subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I greatly appreciate it, and with that said, let's get into today's video. There's been a lot of speculation recently, ever since the XFL and the CFL unveiled their ongoing discussions about what it could mean for the future of both leagues, but honestly, there are several on-field differences that will need to be sorted out in any collaboration effort. So here's a side-by-side look at the rules of both leagues the last time they took the field, in 2019 and 2020 respectively. And I've broken this down by categories, starting with the field size. The XFL uses a traditional US-based set of field dimensions with 100 yards goal line to goal line, 10 yards deep end zones, and with the width of the field being 53 yards. The CFL, on the other hand, uses a much bigger playing surface. Goal line to goal line, the CFL's is a bit longer at 110 yards, but the main differences come in the width and in the end zone parts of the field. The end zones are actually double the depth at 20 yards, and perhaps the biggest difference between the XFL and the CFL from a playing surface perspective is that the width of a CFL field is 65 yards, meaning there's just a lot of grass to cover in the CFL. Additionally, the field goal uprights in the CFL are actually at the front of the end zone, while in the XFL, they are at the back. The second area I want to look at is the down/play clock/timing rules. I'm just going to throw that under one umbrella. Let's get the most controversial one out of the way first. The Canadian Football League plays with 3 downs to gain a first down, while in the XFL and elsewhere in the United States, they play with 4. Which is the preference depends on who you ask, honestly, but speaking from a personal point of view, I've always thought that each makes sense within the context of each sport. You know, in the CFL, there's much more grass to cover, so to balance it out, there's 3 downs instead of 4. I don't know, that's just the way I've always thought about it. On the subject of a play clock, there actually isn't a huge difference between the two leagues, with the XFL in 2020 using a 25-second play clock, differing from the NFL in this regard, which uses a 40-second one. The CFL pace is slightly faster with a 20-second play clock, but the difference isn't nearly as big as it is between the two leagues and the NFL's play clock. One more note on timing that is key. The XFL in 2020 attempted to make their game more fluid with less stoppages by installing a consistently running time clock from the beginning to the end of a possession, barring a timeout, of course. This means that on an incomplete pass, the clock would still run as soon as the ball is spotted. This differs from both the NFL and the CFL, where an incomplete pass stops the clock in any scenario. Okay, I lied. There's one more timing detail difference. The XFL has a time stoppage with 2 minutes left in each half, referred to as the 2-minute warning, while in the CFL there's a 3-minute warning. In both leagues under 2 minutes or 3 respectively, the clock does not run between plays until the ball is spotted, rather than running when a tackle is made in the field of play. This differs greatly from the NFL, where you often see kneel downs run out the rest of the clock inside of 2 minutes. The third area we're going to look at are alignments. In the XFL, each team has 11 players on the field, while in the CFL there are 12 per side. Again, this makes sense in the context of the field dimension, again, more space to cover in the CFL. In terms of motion, in the XFL, all players must be set in place at the snap, except for one player moving laterally in motion. The CFL differs greatly in this regard, with only 7 players required to be set at the line of scrimmage at the snap, while other players on the offense are free to get a running start as long as they are behind the line when the ball is snapped. This pre-snap motion is referred to as the waggle. In the XFL, the defenders line up just slightly apart from the offense, just like in the NFL. But in the CFL, there is actually a 1-yard gap between the two lines. This is a reason why in the CFL, if you're a newcomer to the CFL, in situations when teams are only requiring 1 yard to get the first down on 3rd down, you'll often see them go for it because it's much easier to gain that yard in these short yardage situations because of that gap. And the next thing I'm going to look at are the scoring rules of both leagues. The XFL, for the most part, uses very similar scoring rules to that of the NFL, with safeties counting for 2 points, field goals counting for 3, and touchdowns resulting in 6. But there's one key difference that the XFL experimented with during its brief 2020 season. After scoring a touchdown, teams had 3 options. 1. Try a 1-point play from the 2-yard line. 2. Attempt a 2-point play from the 5-yard line. Or 3. Attempt a 3-point play from the 10-yard line. This was something we've never seen before in football, and because of the XFL's limited amount of games that they got to play prior to the pandemic, we didn't really get to see the full effect, a full sample size of these rules. For the CFL, again, 3 points for a field goal, 2 for a safety, and 6 for a touchdown. Just like in the NFL, the CFL gives you 2 options after you score a touchdown. 1 for kicking just a short field goal through the uprights for 1 point, or running a snap from the 5-yard line for 2 points. But there is one final scoring play in the CFL to cover, and it's probably its most controversial, the Rouge. Basically what this is when the ball is kicked into the end zone and the opposing team does not run it out, the kicking team receives a single point. This can happen on missed field goals, punts, and even occasionally on kickoffs. The result of the Rouge for the receiving team is that they advance the ball up to their own 35-yard line, basically the equivalent to an XFL touchback. Personally, I've never cared for the Rouge, even as a CFL fan, but that's just me. And speaking of the kicking game, our 5th category is the kicking game. Let's start with the XFL first. Field goals are pretty similar, like I mentioned previously, except for the fact that the XFL uprights are at the back of the end zone instead of the front, like they are in the CFL. Kickoffs and punts are where you have some major differences. On kickoffs in the XFL, the kicker lines up back at his own 30, while the rest of the players, aside from the returner, are lined up on the other 35 and 30-yard lines respectively. Players cannot move until the returner touches the ball. Kickers are also incentivized to keep the ball in play, with the receiving team advancing the ball up to their own 35-yard line if the ball is kicked into the end zone. In the CFL, the field is too long for kickers to consistently kick the ball into the end zone, and unlike the XFL, the kicking team is able to get a running start while all players can move right after the ball is kicked. The width of the field combined with these rules makes the CFL kick returns the best in professional football, in my opinion. Punts are another area where the XFL made some tweaks and tried to innovate the game a bit, discouraging kicks into the end zone and out of bounds in general by making the incentives to do those things much lower. Additionally, no player on the punting team in the XFL, not even the gunners at the edge of the formation, can run downfield until the ball is kicked. The result of this is a game that doesn't see nearly as many fair catches as you would see in the NFL, where most punts are not even returned because of this. On punts in the CFL, gunners can begin running downfield at the snap, but the difference is that the returner is given a 5-yard buffer zone, or halo, at the first touch of the ball. Failure of the punting team to keep that distance results in a penalty called no yards. There are 2 varieties of no yards penalties you should be aware about. 1 for 15 yards if a defender is in zone as the returner catches the ball in the air, and 2, a 5-yard penalty if a defender is in the buffer zone after the ball bounces off the ground before first touch by the returner. Flags like these are common on punts in the CFL if you're new to watching the game, but these rules also make the punt return game so exciting as it encourages wide open returns. Returns are also encouraged in the CFL by penalizing the punting team for punting the ball out of bounds between both 20-yard lines. That will result in a flag. And finally, the leagues use different sized footballs, with the CFL using a slightly bigger ball than the XFL did in their 2020 season. With that said, that's what I came up with for today's video. I'd like to thank everyone for watching. Be sure to let me know in the comments one of the several differences I was bound to miss when making this comparison. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, consider liking and subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.